We usually talk about the middle class as a question of money, wages, prices, housing, inflation. But behind all that is a stranger question. How can we be richer, more productive, more educated, more advanced, and yet normal life feels so harder to reach? Maybe because the middle class has never been just about how much people earn. Maybe it was also about whether ordinary people could still trust the world around them. A normal street is safe, a normal park is usable, a normal school is decent, and everyday contact with strangers feels predictable. You should not have to move your life into private spaces just to have a normal life. Normal life should be built into the world around you. But when that world stops working, something fundamental changes. The middle class may still exist as an income group, but its way of life is no longer the default condition of society. I visited Los Angeles once, and it made me think about all this in a new way. I knew the city had its problems, but I still had high expectations. After all, LA is one of the centers of the modern West. Money, movies, culture, politics, global influence. And that is what made the experience so strange. At first glance, much of the city still looks normal. Palm trees, impressive buildings, the renovated public spaces. But then you actually walk through it, and those spaces feel very unwelcoming. Trash on the streets and in the parks. You have to move around people lying on the pavement, looking like addicts or people with mental problems. Parks that had just been renovated, but once you get closer, the smell of urine feel taken over and become unusable for ordinary people. Sidewalks used as improvised markets, with goods spread out on blankets, the kind of street economy you expect to see in the third world, not in one of the richest cities in the West. That was what shocked me the most. The public space was still there, but the disorder changed how it felt and who actually wanted to use it. Los Angeles is maybe an extreme case, but it is not a completely separate story. You can see the same pattern in many Western cities. Public space become less predictable, less orderly, less comfortable for ordinary people, and normal life moves into private space. I was not surprised that Los Angeles had problems. What shocked me was the collapse of a shared standard. I felt like nobody was willing to enforce even the basic level of order. A sidewalk should be walkable. A park should be usable. A street should be clean enough that ordinary people do not feel pushed out of it. Public space should not feel like it belongs to whoever can tolerate the most disorder. These are not small aesthetic preferences. They're the basic conditions that make public life possible. You do not create real public space only by spending money. A shared space needs a shared standard. A society is not made only by money. It is also made by many small things around you. How you feel when you leave your house, when you leave your office, when you move through the city, when you enter the world you share with strangers. This is the everyday face of the civilization you live in. A city does not become livable because everyone is rich, educated, or thinks the same. It becomes livable when very different people enter the same basic frame of public behavior. Public is not the same as usable. A park may belong to the city, but if it smells of urine, feels unsafe, and ordinary people would not sit there, then the public has already lost it. What remains is the public space used mainly by the people with no choice, some tourists and a few idealists. Ordinary people stop going there. They stop feeling that it belongs to them. They start protecting themselves from disorder. They move more of their life into private spaces, where they feel safe, and where people around them follow the same basic rules. And then the paradox appears. The more a society refused to exclude any behavior, the more ordinary people excluded themselves. This is why we cannot talk about the middle class only as an income group. I think that is the mistake we make. It is not just people somewhere between the rich and the poor. It is a way of life, a way of living, where ordinary people feel that society is still something they can belong to, not something they must constantly protect themselves from, or escape from. When the shared world works, ordinary people participate in public space. And then middle-class life becomes the default, something ordinary people can realistically reach. People across a wide income range can have confidence in the world around them. Ordinary life does not feel like a constant struggle. When the shared world stops working, normal lives become a luxury good. It becomes private. Safety becomes something you buy through a better neighborhood. Education, something you buy through a better school. Mobility, something you buy through a car or an Uber. Clean space, you buy through private gyms, clubs, private courtyards, and controlled bubbles. This is the privatization of normal life. For the rich, this does not change much. In a way, they barely need the public world. They can buy private order. The poor often have no escape. They are left inside the disorder. But the middle class is trapped in the middle. It cannot fully escape the common world. It still needs that common world to work. But it keeps buying more and more private space, just to keep normal life possible. And when the common world fails, the middle class starts paying twice. Once for public system it no longer trusts, and again for private substitutes it increasingly needs, just to get what used to be a normal middle class life. I think this also explains a deeper anxiety of the modern middle class. It is not only the fear of having less money, it is the fear that one setback can move you in a different world. In a society where normal life is still public, a setback hurts. You may have an older car, a smaller apartment, fewer restaurants, more modest vacations. The private luxury shrinks, but the basic world around you remains the same. But when normality becomes a private luxury that you must pay for, every fall in income can change your whole world. Suddenly, you're in a worse neighborhood, a worse school, less safety, less order, a different social circle. You do not just lose comfort, you lose the world that made you feel middle class. That is why the modern middle class often feels so anxious. It is not only afraid of having less money, it is afraid of losing that private barrier that still keeps normal life possible. This is where both modern Western right and the modern Western left fail the middle class, but in different ways. The modern right sees the problem of disorder more clearly. It understands that public life cannot exist without safety, boundaries, rules, and consequences. But too often it has given up on the common world. It criticizes the degradation of public space, often as a political talking point, but in practice, its answer is usually private escape. Better neighborhoods, private schools, private security, bubbles where access is filtered by money. But this does not rebuild the middle class society. It is the admission that the normal life now has to be privately purchased. The modern left makes the opposite mistake. It still speaks the language of the common world, public services, community, public transport, inclusion, solidarity. And some of that is necessary. But too often the modern left refuses to admit that the common world also needs standards. A public space cannot survive if every form of disorder has to be accepted as compassion. A park is not a bedroom. A sidewalk is not an unregulated market. A street is not a place where rules just disappear. Money without standards does not rebuild the common world. It only makes decline more expensive to manage. One side gives up on the common world and calls escape freedom. The other side defends the idea of the common world, but becomes afraid to defend the rules that make it usable. And between them, the middle class loses both, the shared public world and the reason to keep paying for it. There is no way around this. A city does not stay livable by itself. It stays livable because people are expected to follow rules, and because those rules are enforced. And that means every real public space depends on the ability to say no. This is not cruelty. It is the minimum condition of shared life. A shared space is not a space where everyone does whatever they want. It is a space where different people accept the same minimum rules. If we want a common world again, we have to defend the rules that make it usable again. And that means society must have the courage to say no. Without that, it cannot stay civilized. I think we misunderstand why the Western middle class feels like it is disappearing. We look too much at money, as if just changing income, growth, or tax policy can change the direction. But the decline is not only about how much stuff people can buy. People today may have more products, apps, deliveries, and cheap things than any middle class in history. But cheap things do not create a livable middle class world. The decline is not always physical. Buildings may be newer, spaces may be renovated, but people want to be there less. The atmosphere is worse, belonging is weaker. This is the real loss. People feel they can no longer live the kind of life they once assumed was built into Western society. They now have to buy what once felt normal. Normality, belonging, a society that still feels like theirs.